Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot, and it genuinely does help us out. All right, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going not too bad at all, Mark. Good to see you. How are you getting on?
Not bad at all. Lewis, I do have to tell you, and I do have to tell the listeners, that my podcasting room has been stripped of all furniture and flooring and any soft furnishings of any kind except from my curtains, because I'm getting a new carpet. So if I'm slightly more echoey... No, I've not just been robbed. I've just not been robbed, no. So right now in this room, there is my chair, my desk, and my podcasting equipment. If I sound slightly more echoey than usual, my apologies. This will be a 1 week thing. I have taken some minor precautions to alleviate this. So, yeah. How are you doing?
Yeah, all good here. I'm hoping there's going to be no funny noises. I'm still kind of getting used to this new podcasting space now that I'm out of the cupboard. It might be not our best Sonic episode.
Are you reminiscing about it yet?
Absolutely not. I had to clean that cupboard over the last couple of days, and I'm glad to see the fucking back of it. So.
Fantastic. All right, Liz, what have you been playing this week?
Just more Resident Evil. I am shocked somehow to be saying, like, this is not a long game, and I feel like I've been playing it for a while, and it's just this perfect storm of life stuff and decent weather and the European Championships that mean I'm not putting in quite as many gaming hours as normal, but I've pushed on with Resident Evil Village very close to the end now. I think I've only got about an hour and a half or so to go, a couple of boss fights basically. I don't have too much to add to what I was saying last week. The game, to me, is not quite as sharp as 7 was, but it's still really, really good. And actually some of the sequences beyond the point that I was at last week, which was just after House Beneviento, the kind of second boss area, I'm now essentially into the fourth major boss area, and there's quite a lot of tidying up around the village to do in between those sections, which I quite enjoyed. Those latter bits, it's just more of the same, but they're good fun. The boss characters that it introduces are weird and grotesque. Some decent encounters there, some good fight sequences more than there are good puzzle sequences. I'll be done with this game before we talk again, Mark, which I'll be glad of, but not because I've not enjoyed the game at all, just that it's not a very long game that I've really laboured over. Overall, I would highly recommend it to anyone who enjoys particularly the more action-y versions of Resident Evil, so to speak. There's definitely several strands of the Resident Evil series now, and this one is pretty gung-ho, it's pretty action-packed. I mean, it does have puzzle sequences and stuff like that, but it's not as interested in that as it is in having you take part in big gunfights at certain points and run for your life quite often. But yeah, overall, enjoying it. We'll be glad to see the back of it, but not because it's not been good.
Yeah, I think a lot of that makes sense, to be honest, man. I think that after our discussion last week, interestingly, I think I've basically talked myself into realising that I enjoyed Resident Evil 7 more than I enjoyed Resident Evil 8. I think there might have been a bit of recency bias playing at me there, to be honest. But again, these two games are synonymous in my mind. I think that you've said it correctly there. The game is definitely good, definitely worth playing. I very much enjoyed my time with it. I don't regret playing it in the slightest. Super good, just off the back of 7, which really was absolutely stellar. It's maybe not quite as good, but still definitely a good game and still definitely worth playing, particularly if you're a fan of the franchise, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. And what have you been playing, Mark?
Well, Lewis, I too am still playing a game which I now feel as if I'm labouring over, which is Cyberpunk 2077. I have one mission to do, and I have just started that mission and then stopped the game. For various reasons, I couldn't go back and finish that mission before we were recording, but I literally have, I would say, less than an hour left of Cyberpunk 2077. I don't have too much to add. What I will say is that I went on a bit of a tirade last week about how I hated the driving, but two of the things that I said there was, one, that it can be incredibly frustrating, and if you want to know why I think that, then you can go back and listen to last week's podcast. But the other thing that I said was that it can be quite boring as well, because a lot of the driving is done on big highways. The whole city's connected by these big, huge highway networks. But the game and the world in general doesn't feel very alive. And I don't know if this is part of the technical issues around the game and perhaps to prevent crashing, but there's not ever that much traffic in the game. As you drive around these massive, massive highways, and they are huge with like big, massive junctions that are actually really well designed, but it sometimes feels as if you're the only car on the road, which is bizarre in the face of something like GTA, which all those years ago really nailed that and making this huge space feel alive and feel busy with people and things happening. And for some reason, Cyberpunk 2077 just hasn't got that. Night City was supposed to be this hustling and bustling future metropolis, you know? And it just doesn't feel like that a lot of the time, which is a bit of a shame. And you can really feel that when you're driving because, again, you can really feel as if sometimes you're the only person there. You're the only person on the road going between two waypoints. Interestingly, when you're like in the heart of the city, it feels less so like that. There are more vehicles and there are more people around, which I suppose makes sense. But on these enormous highways, which is the sort of main routes around the game, do you know what I mean? If you're driving from A to B, you're usually taking onto one of these highways. You can honestly feel as if you're the only person there, which is slightly bizarre, to be honest. The second thing that I was going to say was, I actually don't think that they use the cyberpunk genre particularly well in the game. Particularly in the main story, I would say, is that the cyberpunk thing is... It feels like the backdrop to a lot of stuff rather than posing any actual interesting questions that the genre usually does. Basically, when I think of amazing cyberpunk, I basically think of Ghost in the Shell, which was so full of like big existential questions and stuff like that. And I absolutely love that anime series. And if anyone hasn't watched that, you should definitely do it. Standalone Complex is sensationally good. I thought it was going to be more like that. And it sort of isn't, to be honest. I don't think that they use the genre as well as they could have done, which is a bit of a shame as well. But I mean, overall, the story's good. The main campaign is good. I enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed quite a lot of the side mission stuff. I actually found that often the side missions were doing more interesting stuff than the main missions.
Yeah.
Basically, overall, do you know what it is? The game's fine. The game is absolutely fine. If you think that you'll enjoy it, you should go and play it. It's worth playing. It still does have bugs. It still will crash on you, like, absolutely. I definitely wouldn't recommend it on last-gen consoles. But it's a fine game. It's an absolutely fine game, but it's not brilliant. It's not game-changing. It's not what we were promised, you know?
Yeah, I definitely get that impression from everything you've said about it over the last few weeks. And that point that you made there about the side missions often being more interesting than the main game is something that I think came out quite a lot in the reviews back when it did launch. And it just feels a bit like that. Like maybe there's something about the world that they've got or the overall piece that is quite good or could be quite interesting, but the main bulk of it has just been rushed, both in terms of the technology and in terms of the main plot line.
Yeah. The thing about the world is that, again, in concept, like if you say all the things out loud about the world, it should be so cool and fun to be in, and just a lot of the time it isn't.
Yeah.
Because you think of these like very vertical worlds that they've built there, which are really interesting, and they have lots of wee intricate areas and whatever. It just doesn't feel great a lot of the time, and I can't really put my finger on why that is. But in my head, this should have been the coolest game ever, and it just sort of isn't. And it's a bit unfortunate. I mean, there's a lot of unfortunate things about this game, let's be honest. But yeah, I think that it's just a little bit disappointing overall. In fact, it's not a little bit disappointing. I think in the face of what we were promised, it's a lot disappointing. But I wish it was better than it was. And I think I'll probably leave it there for Cyberpunk 2077.
Fair enough. Well, let's hope we're both beyond these games before next week then.
I definitely will be, I can promise you that. Anyway, Lewis, time for the news. Alright, Lewis, news item number 1. Xbox have announced that xCloud is now widely available on PC, Android, macOS and iOS. xCloud has been available on an invite-only beta since April, but now it is available to everyone as long as you have Games Pass Ultimate. This comes off the back of Xbox updating their data centers with Series X hardware, which we discussed last week. With the updated hardware, they are targeting 1080p 60 FPS as their streaming quality, and they currently have support of over 100 games. Microsoft also announced that on the new Windows 11 operating system, they will have a dedicated Xbox app which will support Games Pass and xCloud as well. Now, Lewis, last week when we were talking about this, when we were talking about the fact that Xbox were updating their data centers with this hardware, I reiterated my point that I said at the beginning of the year that I thought Xbox were really going to lean into xCloud and that would be a huge part of their marketing moving forward. I then speculated that we might have to wait until maybe 2021 to really see the fruits of that, you know? Partly because of COVID and partly because I didn't think that they were going to launch something quite big in the middle of the year. But little did I know, we only had to wait a week for all of this to absolutely take off. So outside of xCloud being directly on your television, which I understand is something that is very much on the table and that we might very well expect to see soon, this is, very nearly at least, the fully realised Netflix of gaming, right?
I mean, it's definitely closer than we've ever been if we're able to access the Game Pass subscription on any device now, basically. It seems like, yeah, other than directly on your TV, but on laptops and on mobiles, that's as much as people really have been expecting in the short term. So, like you say as well, I was not expecting this rollout anytime this soon. It feels like, I don't know, I would have expected a bit more of a lead-in. It just suddenly it's here and it's kind of like, oh, okay, let's go then.
Yeah, it very much just happened. Like they were just like, oh, this is available to you all now. On you go. I will say, Lewis, I have actually tried this.
Oh, nice. Yeah, good.
I have tried it on iOS, I have tried it on macOS, and I have tried it on Windows. Now, full disclosure, on iOS, you had to connect a controller, and I couldn't be arsed with the faff of that. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you for a cold hard fact that Ori and the Will of the Wisps runs on my phone. Wow. And on macOS and on Windows, I did actually go into the game and just sort of footer about in the first level, basically. Yeah. I wasn't playing the game. I literally just wanted to see if it worked and how well it worked. Latency, very, very short, I would say. Like, there is a wee bit, I did actually notice a wee bit more on Windows, weirdly, than I did on my Mac. But, interesting. Like, quite genuinely, that could easily come down to my internet connection at that given moment, you know. But yeah, man, I mean, simply put, it works. It does work.
And so, see, when you say that you had to connect a controller for your phone, was that just for Ori specifically? I thought it would give you touch controls.
So there is not a lot of support right now on iOS. I don't know if it's different on Android. I can't test it on Android, obviously. But I know that there isn't a huge amount of touchscreen support. So everyone is being encouraged to attach a controller, or you know how one of these devices like a Razer or that backbone thing that you can sort of plug your phone into that gives you a controller, basically turns your phone into a Switch. Something like that would work. Also interesting to note as well that PlayStation 4 controllers also work with xCloud. If you only have that and you don't have an Xbox controller, you can use a PlayStation controller. I did actually use an Xbox controller, but maybe I'll try it with the PS4 one just to see how well that works. It should just work, you know. So I think that touchscreen support will come in time. I mean, Xbox have been rolling this out relatively slowly, I would say, but I think from now on, like if we're now opening this up to the world and people are being encouraged to go and play on their phones, I think that they might be introducing touch support quite quickly for a lot of these games. To be honest with you, it still wouldn't be the way that I would choose to play. No. Complex controls on a touch screen are very difficult to work with, I find anyway. Like the tactile feel of the buttons is so important, and you don't really appreciate that about controllers until it's not there, you know. But I think that they probably will be introducing that relatively quickly. But I mean, as I said, man, bottom line, it fucking works. And as part of our Games Pass Ultimate subscription, like me and you just have this
just
now
have it
because
already,
we subscribe to Games Pass.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to jump in and have a look. Maybe later tonight, maybe tomorrow. I just want to do exactly what you've said that you've done, basically like boot up a game or two, see how it looks. And I think, you know, given the library that is part of the Game Pass Ultimate subscription now, there's bound to be some games that do work quite well just with touch controls, given at the moment they might not have the support for it. But there's plenty of smaller games, wee indie games, puzzle games and stuff like that probably would work okay in that way. So if people are thinking, oh well, I don't want to have to go and buy an Xbox controller or whatever, there's definitely going to be support for these things. They were definitely talking quite a bit about touchscreen controls earlier on, you know, when this was first getting talked about and kind of rolled out. So this is a really exciting time. I'm almost like, I wish I had a chance to give it a go before now, just to see if I could have the same experience as you, but it sounds like it works, and if it does, then yeah, this is really exciting. It'll be really cool to see how well it works and what kind of new experiences we can have with it.
Again, man, I can only tell you from my extremely narrow test case, and I cannot emphasize that enough, extremely narrow test case, but it works, man. It fucking works. All right, Lewis, news item number 2, and I hope you enjoyed your one Xbox story because the rest of this is PlayStation. I think that they might have been waiting for a certain E3 to finish before they mentioned any of their stuff. But anyway, listen, news item number 2. PlayStation have announced that they have purchased Housemarque games for an undisclosed fee. This is obviously off the back of the recent success of Returnal, which I would say is currently one of the best showings, if not the best showing of next-gen hardware that I've played anyway. I think Ratchet and Clank might be around there as well, but certainly as far as the games that I've played, Returnal is definitely head and shoulders right now, I would say. Housemarque themselves have said that this acquisition gives them stability and allows them to show us all what they can create without limitations, which is something that is really exciting, because if Returnal is what they can create with limitations, then without limitations they could be doing something really special. Obviously, what they're really talking about here is that now that they are part of the PlayStation Studios family, they have the financial stability to be able to take a lot more creative risks, which is why devs sign up to these deals in the first place. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot less risky to take interesting creative decisions that might not pay off. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, taking risky decisions is often where you get the best games, which is why this is a fantastic announcement, or I think so anyway. And while that is exciting, Lewis, something very weird did happen over at the PlayStation Japan Twitter account. The account was tweeting the announcement of the acquisition of Housemarque, but they seem to have accidentally attached an image welcoming Bluepoint to the PlayStation Studios family, not Housemarque. The tweet was subsequently deleted, but industry insider Nibble did manage to confirm that the tweet was legit and did come from the official PlayStation Japan account. This is also extremely exciting because Bluepoint have really established themselves as premium remake specialists. You know, the Demon's Souls remake was absolutely incredible, and before that, the Shadow of the Colossus remake was absolutely incredible as well. Comfortably two of the best remakes out there, in my opinion, anyway. But what that would mean as well is that this is two huge, if it's true, this is two huge back-to-back acquisitions by PlayStation. Now, granted, both of these studios were making PlayStation exclusive games second party for years now, to be honest. But I think that this is exciting all the same. Like, with the financial backing and the support of PlayStation, considering the quality of games that these two studios were already making, this could be something really special, I think.
Yeah, absolutely on that point. But for both of these studios, it's great news for them, and if the Bluepoint part is true, but I cannot see that it won't become true.
I mean, it was an official image that had Bluepoint and even had the cover art for Demon's Souls like added to their wee graphic next to Housemarque, and I was like, oh, okay, this is definitely real. It was a bit of a fumble, I have to say, by PlayStation Japan though.
Yeah, absolutely, it was. Yeah, I'm sure their social media guy will be pretty gutted today after that. But
I hope he's still got his job.
Yeah, surely. I mean, yeah, so for the purposes of this conversation, I think we're both just going to assume that Bluepoint is official and it's happening. And as I was saying there, for both of these studios, that's great news. Like you were saying, Mark, it brings stability, it eases those financial restraints. You know, not that either company would really have been under any, given how closely they've been working with PlayStation recently, but it's just that extra step to say, you know, don't worry, you're part of the family now, it's all going to be okay, you can make whatever games you want. Although even that point will be interesting to see how Bluepoint proceeds, because surely now PlayStation will be essentially directing them on what games to remake, you know, or to glow up, or whatever it is that Bluepoint are going to do next. But
that's what we should start referring to remakes as, the glow up of the game.
And just to touch briefly on Housemarque itself, I mean, I think that it's great that Returnal has done well enough, or at least shown the promise that studio has to get this deal over the line. It makes sense. I think probably if you'd asked a lot of people, they would have thought that Housemarque was probably on the cards to be bought by PlayStation, given the relationship, given...
Oh yeah, man, I could see this a mile away.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's great that they've done that now. They've given Returnal a bit of time to gestate, to let it land with players, and people have loved it. I certainly enjoyed my time with it. I really want to go back to it some point after Resident Evil's done. I know you really enjoyed it, apart from the roguelike elements, and that'll be the interesting thing to see from them. I mean, they've been making kind of like AA level games or indie level games for a while. They've been making these quite kind of arcadey hits, and it will just be interesting to see now, do they become the next Insomniac? I mean, are they going to expand massively? Are PlayStation going to keep them at that level and get them just working on these really interesting but quite tight, smaller games? Do they branch away from their core formula? I mean, I hope not. I hope they keep doing what they're doing and they just make it bigger and better, and they take advantage of the hardware and all those other buzzwords that their press release will have included today. But overall, I think it could be really exciting for the team there to see, not just in the next 5 years, not just their next game, but across the next like 15 years, what are Housemarque doing? How big do they become? Do they become a major player in the PlayStation family and in gaming generally?
Well, yeah, I think that PlayStation has a bit of a history, to be honest, of nurturing studios like this. Thinking specifically of Naughty Dog, who went from making Crash Bandicoot to making Uncharted and then The Last of Us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Insomniac is a similar story, I suppose, although they were independent for a lot longer, obviously. But yeah, really exciting times for Housemarque. I almost wonder if, specifically on Demon's Souls for Bluepoint and Returnal for Housemarque, if PlayStation were sort of saying to them, right, prove it. We know that you're a good studio. We want to know if you can make games of this caliber. Go. Do what you're going to do. Do you know what I mean? And I sort of wonder whether PlayStation's second-party strategy... We know that they've made deals with Haven. We know that they've made deals with Firewalk. We know that they've made deals with Deviation Games as well, which was just announced at E3. Yeah. All of which are led by established veterans of the industry. Do you know what I mean? So PlayStation know that it's worth taking a risk on these people. If PlayStation partner with you and say, prove that you can make a fantastic game on our platform and we'll bring you into the family, so to speak. I wonder if that's what they're trying to do. I made it sound a bit like the Mafia there, but you know what I mean?
Mafioso, doesn't it?
You know what I mean, though? Like, I wonder if they're sort of saying, like, if you can prove that you can make a fantastic game for our platform, then welcome aboard, you know?
It makes total sense that, I mean, as a business strategy to, like you say, to essentially give them a trial run, to bring them on board and say, you know, you're making this for us. We're going to, particularly in this generation, you know, we're going to front load this. Returnal is going to be one of our big flagship launch period games that we're going to really shout about. Demon's Souls as well. I mean, other than Miles Morales, it was the game that launched the console, essentially.
Absolutely, it was, yeah.
And so it is kind of saying to them, not just prove it, and not just prove it in terms of sales, and not just prove it in terms of review scores or whatever, but just...
No, I don't mean that. I really mean in terms of, like, quality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think PlayStation as a brand really value that, and games don't go out in their glitchy messes, they go out in their tight.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that is what they were wanting to prove, you know?
Yeah, and you put them out and you see what the reaction is, but you also see, like, what is it bringing to the table? What does it add to our stable of games? You know, we've got our big third-person narrative masterpieces, but this is actually this different type of thing, and you know, Demon's Souls is our... Not that PlayStation hasn't had exclusive Souls-style games before, obviously, in the case of Bloodborne, but it's kind of them going, like, we want a bit of all of these. In contrast, and I don't want to make this about a contrast between PlayStation and Xbox, but Xbox, its acquisition strategy has been much more just volume, just get loads of stuff in. But a lot of their games are fairly similar. You know, we've been talking a lot about how they've got a lot of first-person shooters and they've got a lot of action RPGs or just straight-up RPGs. PlayStation feels a bit more tactical in terms of putting different pieces on the board now. They do have a lot of one thing, obviously, in terms of those
they do, yeah, definitely.
Those big narrative games. But yeah, I think this is exciting. Who knows what Bluepoint will do next? Who knows what Housemarque will do next? It will be good to see in the future. Yeah,
really exciting. And in terms of Xbox and PlayStation, I think that Xbox are very much the shotgun approach, whereas PlayStation are like sniper rifle, right?
People will give us pelters for saying that.
Yeah. Not that either strategy, though. Like, not that either strategy is a bad thing. No. They're just totally different now. They're just both trying to do totally different things. Absolutely, and it's really interesting to see that play out.
Yep.
Alright, news item number 3, Lewis. It seems very sticking with PlayStation, by the way, it seems very likely that we are getting a Ghost of Tsushima director's cut and potentially a standalone DLC. So, firstly, the director's cut. This is almost certainly happening because it has been rated by the North American Ratings Board, the ESRB. It's been rated for both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5, which hopefully means a free upgrade to the PlayStation 5 for someone who's already bought it on the PlayStation 4. 60 FPS, better graphics, all that good stuff. However, the PlayStation 4 version has been rated as having in-game purchases, something that the original game did not have. However, instead of this being microtransactions, I personally think that it's much more likely that this is a purchase of the standalone DLC. Do you know what I mean? If you already have a PlayStation 4 copy, you might have to buy the DLC. However, if you buy the PlayStation 5 copy, then it will come with the DLC. Yeah. I think we might be looking at a situation like that. That's pure speculation at this point. We'll need to wait and see. But onto the DLC, this has been rumoured for a while, but Special Nick on Twitter said with a Sean Connery accent there, who apparently was the founder of Xbox Era, believe it or not, has leaked this information about a PlayStation exclusive game, but apparently he has been correct in the past, so this is someone to pay attention to here. He has said that the DLC will be a standalone expansion and will be called Ghost of Tsushima, which will be the same sort of scale as an Uncharted Lost Legacy or a Spider-Man Miles Morales, and is also aiming to be out this year. While this is just a rumour at this point and should definitely be taken with a pinch of salt, that should be said, the domain ghostofikushima.com has been registered, and if you go to ghostofikushima.com, it redirects you to the official PlayStation Games page. So, you know, that seems like a good sign to me personally. There has been rumours that PlayStation was going to be having some kind of big showcase soon, obviously in the wake of E3. PlayStation weren't part of that, so they were going to be waiting until afterwards to do anything. There was chat that they might be resurrecting PSX even, although I'm not entirely sure about that myself. I think they were much more likely to get a state of play. But Ghost of Tsushima is actually a year old next month as well, so all of this would sort of make sense, you know what I mean? It all adds up, you know? So, two things here, Lewis, I suppose. We now have our second PlayStation exclusive game getting a director's cut after Death Stranding was announced at Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest. And we are getting another smaller Lost Legacy-esque game for Ghost of Tsushima. So, thoughts?
Thoughts? Yeah, the phrase director's cut is quite an interesting one to be thrown around with these games.
It made a lot of sense for Kojima because, I mean, it's fucking Kojima, isn't it? But yeah, for this, it maybe makes a bit less sense, I would say, but...
I mean, two things to that, I guess. Like, it's obviously a term that is used in cinema, and so you can see why Kojima would like to be associated with it.
Yeah.
And obviously Ghost of Tsushima is, you know, is very heavily cinematic. It leans into its cinematic quality.
Hugely.
But it's also, in cinematic terms, it's usually used when there's been so much studio meddling that the product that was put out wasn't really what the director wanted to do. And that surely isn't the case with Kojima. It's hard to imagine that it would be the case with Ghost of Tsushima either, really.
No,
so,
to be honest with you, with Death Stranding, it sounded like they were just drawing attention to Kojima, weren't they?
Kojima,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? He is the game director of all game directors right now, do you know what I mean? Whereas Nate Fox over at Sucker Punch, I'm sure is a fantastic game director, but he doesn't have the same caliber of Kojima, you know what I mean? He doesn't have that name, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so I wouldn't be stunned if this basically is just the PS5 version, you know, the upgrade patch or the bonus content in that sense, and maybe it'll just come with like some additional scenes and maybe some other bits of soundtrack and that kind of thing. That's sort of what I imagine that could be, and I think that that's good. I hope that it is a free upgrade for PS5 players who've already got it on PS4, because there's nothing really otherwise to go back for, except if this DLC is accurate, if this is actually going to happen, and like you were saying, all signs point to it. If there's already a redirecting URL, that's a bit of a smoking gun, it feels to me.
Well, it does feel a bit like that, but take it with a pinch of salt for just now, everyone, I would say.
But I think generally that's a game that merits more content in that way, because I don't think it has a ton of replayability once you've really rinsed it on your first playthrough, which I think most people will do in a big kind of open world game like that. You know, you're going to go and find most of the outposts, you're going to go and find most of the secrets and the fox dens and clear out all the different areas.
It, man.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were pretty close if you didn't platinum
pretty much, apart from the few things that I found too boring to bother going back round for. And you know,
there was some boring stuff at the end of the world.
Yeah, and
the same way all platinums. It's the same way all platinums.
Totally. And I suspect that that's most people's experience of it, because you don't want to just rattle through the story in a game like that. You know, you want to explore it, you want to fill it out. So taking that and following the Uncharted Lost Legacy model or the Miles Morales model of sort of going like, we'll give you a smaller game. It's somewhere between DLC and a full new game. So it's another 4 or 5 hours content, say, and we'll just tweak the map a little bit. We'll throw in some extra new skills, some new throwables, some new weapons and that kind of thing, and just tell a little coda to the narrative there. And we know obviously that Ghost of Tsushima is going to be building towards another big full sequel, probably set on Japan itself, on the main island. So you know, this is a nice little halfway house. It's a good way to get people back in on the PS5. It might lead to more of the Legends content. Sucker Punch have been great, and PlayStation, at keeping this game alive longer than really it probably deserved to be. It was, you know, it's just a big open world game. They come and they go, but it's, you know, they've really supported it with some genuinely interesting stuff.
Yeah, no, they definitely have. I have to admit that my bet for Ghost of Tsushima 2, like the next full Ghost of Tsushima 2, is that it is a prequel, because I think that they were constantly setting up a prequel throughout the main story of that game, and I actually think that there's a really good prequel in that. Usually when you're going backwards, I feel as if that's a bit of a dodgy move, but I feel as if they set it up so well in the main campaign, you know what I mean? No spoilers, obviously, but I think that there's a really good sequel game in there, to be honest with you. I mean, one on mainland Japan, I would take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heartbeat.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, anywhere, set it anywhere in Japan. It was so cool, that game. It was a fantastic, really fantastic game. All right, let's news item number 4, and it's more PlayStation. Insomniac seem to be working on a new multiplayer game. This comes from a job listing which Insomniac themselves posted on Twitter, which specifically states that they are looking for a, quotes, system designer, brackets, multiplayer. So, could not have been more blunt about this. This is obviously notable because the last major multiplayer that Insomniac made was actually Sunset Overdrive for the Xbox One back in 2014. Before that, they had made the games Fuse, and they had worked on the Resistance franchise for PlayStation, and some of the older Ratchet and Clank games had multiplayer as well. However, the job listing also mentions specifically melee-based combat for its multiplayer title. And all of those games extensively use guns, Liz. They extensively use guns. So that to me could point to a new IP, which would be really, really exciting to see from Insomniac. I think that this is pretty interesting, as it is yet more evidence that PlayStation are trying to get IP in the multiplayer space. I think PlayStation IP, as we were just talking about, is mainly story-driven, mainly action-adventure type games, you know what I mean? And they've been very, very successful doing that. But a gap in their repertoire is definitely multiplayer. As I'd mentioned before, they have deals with Firewalk Studios, who is made up of ex-Bungie devs. They have already confirmed that they are making a multiplayer game for PlayStation. And they also have a deal in place with Deviation Games as well, who are made up of ex-Treyarch employees. So to me, it would be shocking if they weren't making a multiplayer game as well, you know? So what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think you're probably right there in what you're lining up. It does seem like they're trying to, you know, as I was sort of suggesting before, that they're looking for the gaps in what they've got and they're trying to fill them either through acquisitions or these second-party deals. And multiplayer is an interesting one because it sort of bucks the trend, really, of what PlayStation first-party games have been about in the last wee while. PlayStation first-party games across the PS4 generation in particular felt almost like the one bulwark against the total multiplayerization of the gaming space. You know, it was like you can rely on there being good single player games here, but they are obviously trying to broaden that out. The thing to me really that makes this a tricky question is that if you want an exclusive PlayStation multiplayer game, it has surely got to be cross-platform then, right? It's got to be on PS4 and PS5, cross-generation, sorry. To do that, we've had those discussions already about are games held back by that in some way? Maybe not in the case of a big multiplayer game because it might just be a big map and it doesn't really matter too much, but I think that'll be an interesting thing because you can't put out a PS5 exclusive multiplayer game at the moment. I don't think there's not enough players out there. It's too small a market. Saying that, with the ecosystem that they have in total, this could be fascinating. We know that, or we think at least, that a Last of Us Factions game is also in the pipeline, so if there's something coming from Insomniac, there's something coming from Naughty Dog, there's something coming from these smaller studios that PlayStation are teaming up with the legacy of working on, you know, with Treyarch on Call of Duty and working for Bungie on Destiny. That is a lot of talent to be pumping into your multiplayer space, so Christ knows what it's going to be. I can't really imagine what an Insomniac multiplayer... I mean, Ratchet and Clank feels like a good candidate if it hadn't mentioned this melee specific thing. You could imagine, having not played it yet, but you could imagine some sort of, you know, multiple rifts in time opening so that there's just loads of ratchets or rivets or, you know, whatever other types of characters are in
I have to say, I'm in total agreement with you there. Hadn't they said this melee focused combat, or that they wanted someone with specifically melee skills, I would have said that Ratchet and Clank was the best candidate as well. I think a lot of people might have been thinking about like a Resistance revival. I'm really not sure about that, to be honest. I would have thought that a new IP would be more likely than that as well. I actually thought the Resistance franchise was great. I thought it sort of died too soon as well, but I think that PlayStation are much more likely to do new IP than go back to something like that, personally. And
I think they should, in that case. You know, I don't think that any of the other games you listed there are really worth reviving in a big way.
Man, Sunset Overdrive 2 would be insane, though, if it went from being an Xbox exclusive to being a PlayStation exclusive.
But that wasn't like a core multiplayer game, right? That wasn't its whole thing, I don't think, having never played it.
I've never played it either, but I think it was, man. I think that was the main component of the game, was the fact that it was a multiplayer. I think that was a huge part of it. I think it was PvE, but yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of then. I just didn't think it was like solely about multiplayer, and so, you know, maybe that is the one, and that will get people excited, but something in that Ratchet and Clank universe with loads of players would be a ton of fun, and if not that, new IP is always exciting. Let's see.
New IP is always exciting, man. I'd love to see it. And Insomniac, you can trust Insomniac.
Yeah, totally.
All right, let's finish off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Mario Golf Super Rush came out this week, currently sitting with a 73 on Metacritic, but the overwhelming reaction to this game, I would say, is that it's a little disappointing. I think that it lacks content versus previous games. I think that the campaign is maybe a bit lackluster versus previous campaigns, and I think that the new modes maybe haven't hit home in the same way that Nintendo were hoping that they would. But Lewis, this has not deterred me in the slightest. I think that me and you should definitely play this game. I have only ever seen Mario Golf really as a party game or as a multiplayer thing, so a lot of these criticisms I don't really care about, to be completely honest with you. This isn't something I would sit down for hours and hours and hours to play the campaign. It's something that I would maybe pop on for a laugh when folk are around, you know what I mean? Or me and you can play it, do you know what I mean? When we're chilling out and having a beer, something like that. I think that I want this game for different reasons to a lot of people, and for that, nothing I've read has deterred me at all. Nothing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Like, none of that stuff matters really as much as just how the gameplay feels. Like, is it good fun to play golf, and is it easy to play golf with your mates? That's kind of the main stuff. And I think there's been a couple of complaints that I don't think it supports 4-player local co-op. Some things like that will get fixed, and there's always ways around it. But yeah, at its core, if the golf part is fun, if it's fun to swing the club and hit that ball, that's kind of the only thing that matters in my mind.
Absolutely. Me and Lewis got semi-addicted to playing the original Mario Golf on Switch Online, so I'm very excited to play this. Like, we're definitely playing it, man. It's definitely happening. Alright, shout out number 2. Scarlet Nexus also came out this week, and this game is very firmly in the anime as fuck genre, Lewis. Very, very firmly in that genre. It's currently sitting with an 80 on PC, PS4 and PS5, and a 75 on Series X. I must admit, Lewis, I am shocked that this game is reviewed as well as it has. You know for a fact, Lewis, that I am not against an anime as fuck game at all, and in actual fact I quite like a lot of them, particularly when they have Platinum-esque combat. But honestly, in the trailers for this game, I thought this looked dreadful. I thought this looked really, really bad. But the combat system is apparently really good and really fun. The world is interesting, so are the characters, and it has an extensive RPG system across the top of it. Fuck knows where any of that was in the trailers, but people seem to be enjoying it, and it seems to have reviewed pretty well for what it is, you know? To be honest with you, to the point that I went from being basically completely uninterested in it to being a bit interested in it.
I knew it would sucker you in eventually, Mark.
Yeah, it did a bit. But folk are enjoying it, and that's the main thing, so thumbs up there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Alright, let's shout out number 3, and it's Abandoned List. It's Abandoned again. I am exhausted with Abandoned List. I am absolutely exhausted with it. Now, I'm not going to go over all the Abandoned rumours and conspiracy theories. You can go and listen to last week's show if you want to hear us talk about that. But to be honest with you, if you don't know about the Abandoned Kojima Silent Hill conspiracy theories, I don't know where you've been for the last few weeks. But the strangeness has continued. The app that they were supposed to be launching this Friday, which was already delayed by 3 days, was postponed again at the absolute last minute, at the very, very last minute, and is now coming out sometime in August, it seems. The alleged game director, Hassan Karaman, was on Twitter again, saying that the delay was because of last-minute bugs and localization issues. He also said that the last few weeks have been very stressful for him and his team, which, if this is just an indie studio making an indie game who were sort of trying to play up to the fact that they were associated with Kojima and this whole thing blew up in a way that they totally weren't expecting, I can imagine he's had a very, very stressful couple of weeks. Lewis, I know that you were having fun with this. I know that you were enjoying it as much as many other people were. But to be honest, at this point, it feels as though either way, whether it's Kojima or whether it's just an indie studio making a cool game, it's gone too far. It feels now like it really has gone too far.
Yeah, a wee bit. I would say that video that he's put out, no matter where you stand on the rumours, just watching someone be kind of visibly a bit, just a bit exhausted looking, sounded exhausted. That's hard. No one wants to see that. No one, well, certainly I would never have wanted the studio to be under that kind of pressure. That's kind of why I was saying last week, that I just see this as a bit of fun. I don't think it matters if it turned out to be Kojima, amazing. If it doesn't, I'm not going to be mad at that studio. I would question some of the decisions that they'd made around leaning into some of that stuff, and I do think there should be questions then asked of PlayStation to a certain extent, why they haven't really kind of stepped into that void and just cleared stuff up. If you're Hassan Karaman and you are telling your publishers this is getting a bit out of control. Could you please help me? I think that, they could have really done something there. At the same time, I still think there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of questions that they could really have put a lot of this to bed by just answering some of those right now. Tell us the name of the game. If it's not something that we already know, like Silent Hill, then it won't matter to anyone. So why are you even hiding it? And, he could have put some of his team on camera, or I get that they're stressed out, so maybe that doesn't work. But there's just various other things like that could have brought some of this to a close. But yeah, as you say, I think if people want to keep going down the conspiracy theory route, fair enough, and have fun with it, but just don't put that on the studio themselves. Just wait for more information to come like that. As I was saying, it's just quite fun to go like, oh, could this mean blah blah blah, but that's it. That's the extent of it. It's just fun to kind of draw those comparisons and work out if we were right or not. It shouldn't affect the development team.
Yeah, it shouldn't affect the development team, but it clearly is at this point, I think. And I hope that it goes without saying that absolutely nobody should be harassing this man, even if he's made dumb marketing decisions. That is completely out of order.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, it's a fucking video game, so calm the fuck down. Alright, Lewis, final shout out number 4. It has been announced that Assassin's Creed Valhalla director Eric Baptizat is leaving Ubisoft to join EA Motive. Baptizat actually helped reboot the whole Assassin's Creed franchise with his work on Origins before working on Valhalla. This is particularly interesting because, as we discussed last week as well, there are very strong rumours corroborated by VGC and Gematsu that EA Motive are working on rebooting or reimagining or whatever. They are bringing back the Dead Space franchises. That is the rumour, that they are bringing back Dead Space in some form. I don't think that this hire necessarily means that rumour is any more or less true, but this is the sort of hire that you would be expecting if it was true, and it would be the sort of hire you'd be hoping to see if it was a true reboot in the sense that we all want it. I know that there was some speculation that, it's EA and they'll bring it back as a mobile game. Like, I don't think that this guy would be on board for that. You know what I mean? He's not a mobile developer. This guy's doing Assassin's Creed games, While I haven't actually played any of the Assassin's Creed games he is working on, it is clear that he has taken the series, or at least helped take the series, from a place of stagnation to being really back at the top of the video game echelon of huge games that come out very frequently. You know what I mean? When a new Assassin's Creed comes out, it sells by the bucket load and people love it, And that wasn't true for a while.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't. No, like you say, I think this is interesting news. Be interesting to see what comes of a talent like that moving across. It's funny, we've been talking a bit about directors on this episode, and as much as game development is absolutely a team thing, much in the same way that cinema is actually made by teams, even though we talk about directors, they are bringing something. They're bringing that knowledge, they're bringing their creativity, they're bringing their team leadership often is the main thing. And so yeah, let's see what comes of this. If it's something that we're already expecting, then great. It might just be a signal that studio generally is moving in a new direction, or is looking to expand or do something more aligned with what Assassin's Creed is, maybe. Who knows? But yeah, great for him. Interesting news, definitely. Let's see what comes of it.
Yeah, definitely. There's something brewing there. Definitely something brewing. And it's almost certainly Dead Space. So get excited, fans. Get excited. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our look ahead to the second half of 2021, Lewis.
It is indeed, Mark. Yeah, so this is just coming off the back of E3 pretty much, and as we sort of enter July and the second half of the year is kind of beginning, we're post-summer equinox, and that's how I think about time, of course.
Very druidic of you there, Lewis, I like that.
Basically, yeah, the calendar has been filled in a bit by E3, essentially. We know what some of the games, at least, that we can expect and when to expect them in the next 6 months, and so we just thought this would be a good chance to talk about what games are coming and what we're excited to be playing, sort of basically between now and the end of the year, basically. So yeah, let's just dive straight in, Mark. Let's just talk about some of these games. Obviously, some of these have come up when we've been talking about E3 over the last few weeks. Some of them have been on the cards for quite a while, but I'm keen to know what you're particularly excited about. So let's dive in.
Well, if you want me to kick off, Lewis, I think that I have to kick off with the game that I am now most looking forward to in the latter half of the year, and that is Metroid Dread.
Yes.
Good Lord, Lewis. When that trailer was shown, I was ecstatic. I actually think that it probably was my highlight of E3. Totally blindsided. and everything about it was screaming to me that this is something that is right up my street and that I desperately want to play.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is coming in October the 8th, I think it is. And yeah, I would fully agree there that the trailer was one of the absolute highlights of E3. It was one of those rare, unspoiled video game surprises.
You know,
This game that had been talked about, a decade or more ago and was thought to be dead, and it's finally returning. And yeah, I just think like at its absolute core, and I know a bit more was shown shortly after the Nintendo showcase itself in their kind of treehouse section, and so some people might have a deeper understanding of what the game is, but it looks very much like traditional Metroid plus some stalker robot type guys who are just like pursuing Samus through the levels, which adds quite a horrifying note to it, I think, based from...
Definitely. I mean, if that is what transpires that the game is, do you know what I mean? Then yeah, definitely. And it's an interesting element, I would say, because they do look terrifying in the way that they were chasing after Samus, and particularly the wee opening cutscene thing where it just cut to gameplay afterwards was terrifying.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that. That is going to be one of the most interesting games. I'm sure that'll get some mixed reactions just because 2D Metroidvania style games are so big at the moment, so popular, that there will be some people who think that it's not quite living up to some of those, but I am personally really excited for it.
Oh, definitely, man. Categorically, cannot wait. What about you, man? Were you interested in?
For another one that's coming out kind of roughly at that same period, just a couple of weeks before, and that is Deathloop, Mark. That is a game that I am really excited to see.
I'm sort of surprised at that, Lewis, if I can just stop you right now, because this game is a first-person shooter.
It certainly is, yeah.
Famously, you're not that into them, so I'm sort of stunned at that.
Yeah, and I will caveat this by saying it remains to be seen whether I definitely will play it or not, but I'm super interested to see what becomes of this game, what the reaction is to it, kind of what effect it has on other games, because the thing that draws me to it is definitely not its first person shooter aspects, but it's more, I mean, partly it's Arcane, right? It's just that I think that Arcane are a really interesting, innovative studio, and I'm really hoping that I've got time before this drops to play through at least Dishonored 2. I've been meaning to play that game for years now, years and years, and I've never quite got around to it. And so I just think that they make these really innovative systems-based games that really allow you to get creative with what you're doing in them. And I just think particularly Deathloop looks a bit like... It looks like it has kind of elements of Hitman in terms of it being sort of these quote-unquote like murder puzzles you have to solve. You know, you have to understand how all your targets are moving around this island and how to get to them and how to draw them into different spaces so that you can get everyone on the same run. And it is also using these time loop mechanics, which are just the biggest thing in games right now.
Yeah, they do seem to be. There's a weird amount of them right now.
Yeah. I think a couple of those mechanics together, plus the creativity that, as I say, Arcane really invest into their games. It's really all about, what do you want to do? You've got this toolkit, you've got this arsenal. How are you going to use it? And how are you going to use it to, in this case, to kind of solve these puzzles? Like, how are you going to get to these people in the order that you need to get to them, or in such a way that you can kill them all in the same run, which seems to be the core part of the game. Then chucking in this other agent who's trying to kill you the whole time, that brings just an extra bit of jeopardy. It just has a lot going for it. It's super stylish. You know, it looks beautiful. It looks like it's going to sound really good as well, like from the wee bits we've got in the trailers. I don't want to hope too much because it could all fall flat, but I think it should be something quite special.
I have to admit, while I do think that the game looks great, I'm not sure that it was really exciting me. But to be honest with you, listening to you talk about it, I'm sort of like, yeah, this game is really good. Yeah, like you said, the aesthetic of it was the first thing that really grabbed me. I mean, it's so pulpy, which is now something that we associate very much with Tarantino. And again, they're bringing the soundtrack, and I think they're sort of playing off that quite a bit. But it does look aesthetically fantastic. As you pointed out as well, Arcane are definitely a studio you can trust by and large. I would say the Dishonored franchise was absolutely beloved, and this is an exciting new project from them. Do you know what I mean? Very interested to see how that lands. Very interested to see.
Yeah, and one of the last Bethesda games we'll get to play on PlayStation, so
yeah,
drink
absolutely.
it in.
I mean, genuinely, it is, absolutely. Although, speaking of games on PlayStation, Lewis, Kena, Bridge of the Spirits, coming on August the 24th. This might be my most anticipated PlayStation game for the rest of the year, depending on how the rest of the year goes, but we'll come back to that point. Just put a wee pin in that just now. But I mean, this game looks like playing a Pixar movie. A lot, I suppose, in the same way that Ratchet and Clank looks like ridiculously realistic for being like a cartoon, basically. I don't know what else to say, but apart from the fact that it looks like playing a Pixar movie, it looks like if Pixar did Pikmin, then you would get Kenna. Do you know what I mean? I don't know, like, you seem to be less keen on it, but then I think that the last trailer that came out where it started to show you bits of the combat and whatever, oh man, it totally blew me away. It looks like visually stunning, but also like mechanically, and everything the game is doing is right up my street. It looks fantastic.
Yeah, you're spot on there that when I first saw this, there's no doubt it looks gorgeous. Absolutely no question about that. I just wasn't totally sold on it. I wasn't really sure what it was kind of going for or whatever. But yeah, that most recent time we saw it, was that a State of Play? Was it just before the summer, really?
I'm not sure. It must have been something.
Yeah,
like that.
something along those lines. Yeah, something else came out of that trailer, whether it was just that the combat looked really good, whether it was that we just got to see a bit more of the gameplay and the systems at work. It became a bit clearer what it is, what the tone of it is and all that. After that, I was like, oh, actually, there is something quite interesting about this. So I'm not losing my mind about it yet, but it is coming pretty soon. I mean, I think it's the
August the 24th.
That's right, yeah. And that means that we'll get more information probably in the next couple of weeks. I mean, well, I'm hoping more than I'm thinking, if I'm honest, that we're going to get a PlayStation broadcast in July, and that would perfectly set that up along with several other games that we're waiting for dates for this year.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think that if they are doing a big event, I think that will definitely feature at it because, as you said, it's coming pretty soon, man, and exciting.
One that's coming even sooner that I just want to give a quick mention to, Mark, is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword.
Yes.
Which is just over 2 weeks away, July 16th that's coming out, and definitely a game with a mixed reception on its initial release, we should say. A lot of disdain for that game when it came out before, but I am just in a big Zelda kick. I just want to see more of these games. Like, I really loved that Link's Awakening remake that we got. This looks a bit less like a game that I would be totally sold on. It looks still a little bit choppy from the bits we've seen recently, and I'm not totally sold on the transition from motion controls to the sticks, although I'm very glad that they have done that. I'm waiting to see what people think of how that feels,
Yeah. I must admit, I am a lot less excited about this than I sort of want to be. I think that I'll almost certainly still play it. But as you said, I wonder, because I actually don't know a great deal about this game, apart from the fact that it had a bit of a ropey reception. But I wonder if that ropey reception is down to motion controls and the fact that motion controls suck. And I am unapologetic about the fact that I fucking hate motion controls. I really, really do. So the fact that they've transferred this onto a proper gamepad is fantastic. How that will translate remains to be seen because the game was obviously designed with motion controls in mind, but we'll see. I'm hopeful, but I don't have massive expectations for that, if I'm totally honest. But listen, I think that we have to mention two games, I think, from the big console platforms. One, Halo Infinite, and two, Horizon Forbidden West. Neither of which actually have hard and fast dates, but both of which are slated to come out this year. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Lewis, but I think that we're both pretty confident that Halo Infinite will be coming out this year, and I think that we are both slightly skeptical now about whether Horizon Forbidden West will come out this year. And this is probably the only thing, to be honest with you, talking about Horizon, the only PlayStation game that I would say tops Kenna right now. And just seeing the gameplay trailer and whatever recently, I was just thinking, yes, I'm about this. I want this game. Please give it to me. I don't know if it's coming this year though, and I think that that's a problem. Whereas Halo Infinite, I'm pretty confident it's been delayed for a year already. If it doesn't come out this year, something's went drastically wrong.
Yeah, I have absolutely no doubt at all that Halo Infinite is coming this year. Phil Spencer even said a week or so ago that they know when it's coming out. They're just waiting for some other games to fall into place, which basically means they're waiting to find out what date Call of Duty is releasing this
I was just going to say that. They want to avoid Call of Duty desperately,
That's all it is. So, you've got a window there. It's going to come out some point between, I would suggest, the middle of October and the middle of December, but probably basically in November.
Yeah, I would have thought so.
And we'll be talking about that game tons more in future, so let's not labour it too much here. But from what we've seen, it does feel like they've overhauled it from that bad first look. It is going to be huge. It has to be huge. It has to be a hit. It really has to land. I can't really stress that enough. I think it will be an absolute disaster if that game doesn't live up to at least some of the fairly massive expectations that people have for it. Xbox need a win from that. Not that they're not getting wins elsewhere, by the way, before anyone jumps down our throats, but it's Halo. It has to be. It just has to be this gargantuan success.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, they're setting it up to be that way, as they should be, because, as you said, it's Halo. This is the premium Xbox IP. I mean, you can go on about your Gears of War all you want and your Fables and all that, but really, when it comes down to it, Halo tops everything. This is their Mario, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, yeah, I think that this definitely has to be set up for success. And to be honest with you, I think that the fact that Xbox have delayed it from the launch of their new console, which is mad. It's mad that they did that at the time, but I'm hoping that the fact that they have taken a huge amount of extra time over this game, that it has been turned around, and actually this is going to launch in a really good state, and we're all going to see it, and we're going to go, that delay was completely worth it, and good decision, Xbox.
Absolutely, I think we will be in that place.
On Horizon, though, do you think it's going to come out this year? Just bottom line.
I think it's probably touch and go. Honestly, I think it is probably like on the brink of being delayed into next year at this point. I wouldn't be stunned if it ended up being like a January, February game in 2022, if I'm totally honest. Just for that extra bit of polish. We've seen PlayStation move games by a matter of weeks in the last couple of years, so I wouldn't be stunned if that happened.
No, me neither. And just as we were talking about earlier on with PlayStation do not release games when they're not ready to be released, you know what I mean? So PlayStation will delay this game, you know what I mean? And The Last Horizon, I'm pretty sure, came out in January as well.
I think that's right,
It wasn't on the Christmas release window, but if it's not going to be Horizon, then PlayStation aren't going to have anything in that window, I don't think. Not anything of that calibre anyway, certainly. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, PlayStation are definitely not beyond moving games like this. As you said, whether it's going to be a couple of weeks or whether it's going to be a couple of months, they'll move it to make sure that it's ready when it comes out, you know, and make sure that it's polished and make sure that from day one gamers are having a good experience, you know.
Absolutely. And I think we'll know that sooner rather than later, honestly, because I don't think they'll wait until we get almost into October, that September, October kind of area where you'd imagine the game would come out. I don't think they'll wait until that point to delay it. I think they'll tell us before then, just to set expectations. I don't think they will want that to look like a last minute delay. I think they'll want to put that out there as like, we're just taking the time, we're making this right, that's what's happening, you know?
Yeah, I think that they're going to do an event soon. I don't think that Horizon will feature at that event, but I think that they'll want to get that out the way before they start putting negativity out there, you know? Yeah, exactly. So I reckon it'll probably be, if we're thinking that in July they're probably going to do some event maybe in August that gets announced, whether or not it's actually going to make 2021 or not. There's a lot to look forward to here, but I think specifically I love the amount of AA and indie games that are coming out that I am incredibly interested in the latter half of the year, you know?
Yeah, I'd totally go along with that. There's don't get me wrong, there are still some big hitters there. I mean, if you look at October alone, you've got like Far Cry 6, you've got Back 4 Blood, Battlefield, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, Guardians, yeah, Far Cry, yeah, didn't even mention them. There's loads of stuff that we're not even mentioning here.
There are big games
There's
like
1,000 things that we're missing, sure.
But I would go along with that. Like, there are tons of smaller games, and I think that that's basically the story of 2021 in a lot of ways. We've seen from last year and into this year a lot of big games get pushed, get delayed because of the pandemic, basically, and the effects that that's had. But there's still tons of smaller games coming out that I keep thinking if PlayStation do have an event soon, they're going to put dates on a lot of the stuff that was showing off at their big PS5 showcase event last year. You know, things like Jet the Far Shore and Little Devil Inside that we're waiting on and that kind of thing. So there's tons of those caliber of games that I think will actually make for a really interesting back half of the year. But if you just try and look at the big hitters, it does feel a little bit thin on the ground until Halo and Horizon get their dates. At that point, I think we're looking at a pretty massive end of the year as well.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously you've got, as you mentioned, you've got your Call of Duties and all that coming. Battlefield, never even mentioned that as well. Jesus, you know what I mean? There's loads of stuff coming. There really is. Exciting times, Lewis. Exciting times, but I really think that we are lucky to live at a time where the indie space, and we're getting so many different smaller games that are just so diverse and so creative, and yeah, it's awesome. And even when we were going through our E3 hidden gems last week, I was just thinking, God, there is so much, there are so many video games. How can I play them all? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, 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 really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, it just helps us out so much. It really does only take you 5 seconds, and it does a huge amount to help us. I know I say this twice a week, every single week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Greece, which we will be talking about next week. We actually got the dates of this wrong last week. We thought we were talking about it this week, but we're not. We're talking about it next week, so there you go. I think you've already finished it, Lewis, and I've got the very end of the game left as well.
Yeah. Having got my dates wrong, I put some hours into it over the last few nights, which ate into my Resident Evil time, obviously. But yeah, I have now finished it, and I'll save all my thoughts for next week's discussion. But yeah, a good game, well worth playing, and I hope other people are going to play along with us. Yeah,
I'm very much looking forward to discussing this one, I have to say. Very much looking forward to it. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.